Well, welcome back. In this session, we're going to be looking at multi-channel television services. Your first question is, what are you talking about? Okay, what we're talking about is cable TV specifically. I mentioned it last time. This time, we're going to be a little more detailed. And also direct broadcast satellite, which is DBS, which is the satellite version. And various pay television services are what we're talking about when we talk about these multi-channel services. So the world market right now, just so we get an idea, is, and this is a little bit dated, but it's hasn't changed that much over the last few years. The cable TV, most places are using cable TV, are using cable that have cable. And you can see that satellite's got a pretty good chunk of the market now. And the last one, Internet Protocol, this is when you just use the internet to deliver your cable services. Like Verizon has that service, AT&T has a service they call theirs UVerse. But that's what the market share is. So it's mostly cable TV, very little IPTV. Okay, just some fast facts about cable TV, or about TV in general. In 1937, Lewis Cook took out a patent for to send pictures over the wire. He had a patent in 37. And like I said last time, NBC bought up most of the patents, and they said they started TV in 1939, although it has been around for a few years. In 1936, Olympics were broadcast on TV, thanks to Farnsworth licensing to Germany. CATV is an interesting phenomenon. You may not know much about it. It used to be a big deal. It's not as big a deal as it used to be. It's called community antenna television. Now, what is that? Well, in the old days, in 1949, as you can see when they actually started that, we just had broadcast. We had NBC, we had ABC, we had CBS. Actually, we didn't even have ABC yet. I think we had CBS and NBC. But at any rate, what would happen is this. You just say, this is a situation, this is a real situation. Guy owns a hardware store. He wants to sell TVs in 1949. TV is just coming into its own. We said the golden age is 1950. But the people say, well, we can't get any reception. We live way out here in the country. So this guy in Pennsylvania, he builds a big tower on a hill at the end of wherever his town is, and he puts antennas on it so he can receive these signals from a long distance. And he runs a coaxial cable through town. And what he does is he sells the TVs, and he can't sell the cable TV. It's against the law. You can't charge for cable TV, but he can charge for hooking them up. So that's how cable TV starts. It's really just broadcast TV that's going to be run through a cable because they couldn't receive the signal. So the original people that cable TV was for rural people. They didn't have any trouble in the city getting reception. It was in the country. But you couldn't charge for it. You couldn't have pay TV. It wasn't legal until 1959. Then you could actually have cable. You could charge for the TV services. Subscription television, where you subscribe to certain channels, started in 1968. I told you last time, HBO, which originally used a microwave. We have one outside of our building in Strickler Hall, by the way. We have a tower that we used to use to receive microwave from Shelby campus. But anyway, if you have some kind of novel service you want to make available, they would use microwave. And HBO was originally, in 1968, was a novel service. But in 1972, it became a national service, and they were using satellites and this kind of thing to actually broadcast it. And it came out with recent movies rather than old movies like most TV stations had. And sporting events was a big one, especially boxing. It still is big. And at this time, remember in 1934, we talked about, we had the FCC started. So we started this battle. The FCC, do they regulate cable or not? And that's something that still hasn't been settled absolutely. But anyway, there's some fast facts that we just getting started in TV. Now, this is how it works. You see, the guy's got a big antenna at the end of on a hill someplace, and it picks up his signals. And he has what you call a head in, which is where all the stuff is, where all the content is. And it's just running through town. And they had these taps, okay, using coaxial cable. And you can see that every time we tapped something, a tap would be one of these items here. A drop was when you actually put it in somebody's house. So even to this day, they still call, if you have cable TV at your house, you have a drop. Okay, and they're using coaxial cable, and they still use that frequently from the tap to your house. Now we use fiber optics to get to the tap. But that's what it looks like, very, very simple construction, okay? Okay, so how do we acquire the signals? Well, cable began as a community antenna TV, CATV, and you'd get it through just regular TV antennas. But you also get, you have a large tower where the antenna is capturing broadcast signals, and then all they were doing is retransmitting it over wire to the community. So they would obtain a distance signals via landline, antenna, microwave, satellite, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so we came up with things like superstations. There was a big one in Atlanta, WTBS. Ted Turner owned it. It was very popular back in the 70s and 80s. Chicago had one, WGN was another superstation. New York had one, I forgot to call letters. There was one in LA. These were superstations. They weren't networks. They were independent stations, but they were then providing their signal to cable companies so they could broaden their reach. And by broadening their reach, they also delivered more content to customers. I used to watch WGN all the time on my cable, even though I didn't live in Chicago, which is where WGN is. Now, so we have superstations, and we have the broadcast content, and then we're going to have cable exclusive stations. And what I mean by that, HBO, CNN, channels that were just on cable. They weren't broadcast. Okay? And so now and that gave cable, they had more content, which would be a drawing card for people to want to sign up. They also had pay TV. HBO was largely pay TV at the beginning. Of course, it's always been subscription, but they also had pay TV, which means when you want to watch a particular show, particular event, you could pay for that event. Just like you were going to the movies, here's your money. They would say, okay, this is going to cost you $35 or $50 or whatever it's going to cost. And then you just pay it, just like part of your regular bill. Okay, there's also local programming. Okay, now let me back here just so that we can mention this for a second. So now we can see what we had. Cable had, okay, superstations. It had the cable exclusive content providers like HBO and Showtime, etc. And they had local programming, which would be your local news and that kind of thing. So they had those three things. That made cable much more attractive. And people would be willing to pay for it. And that becomes a big issue, which I'll talk about in a minute. Now, let's talk about this technology for just a second. We have the head in, we have the trunk cable, feeder distributor cable, subscriber drop, and terminal equipment. Now you're thinking, well, what is all this stuff? Okay, let's look at it this way. Here's your traditional network tree. Where we collect all the content, using satellites, using antennas, using microwave, using wires, whatever we're using, that's the head end. That's where all the content is. And what we're going to do is we're going to distribute it out to our customers, presumably into neighborhoods where people live. So you can see on this drawing we have amplifiers which will reproduce the content so that so it'll be loud enough when it gets to the inline. The main cable coming out of the head end is going to be called the trunk cable. Okay. Now, what trunk cable is a main line, and then off the trunk cable, we'll have feeder cables that will go into like cul-de-sacs or into small neighborhoods, etc. And in those neighborhoods, you will see we will have taps, and each tap will have X number of drops, and that varies out depending on the tap. Okay, so what you get at your actual house is you have a drop in your house. So you can see how it works, how this network works, how the infrastructure gets to your house with the cable. Okay? Now let's look at this in a little more detail. The bandwidth on the coaxial cable is 750 megahertz. And the cable can carry more channels than the broadcast can, so we can have more channels going on that cable, on the coaxial. Like I said, today we're using fiber optics, which makes a very different. We can put a lot more stuff on the cable than we used to. Okay, there is a picture of the coaxial cable. And I want you to notice that in the middle that's the main conductor. And then they have insulation around it. And they also have a coating on the outside and shielding. And the shielding is so that the coaxial content won't leak. Here's a reality. If you take a TV that has cable connected to it and you set it there on a counter and you set another TV next to it that doesn't have cable connected, that TV that's not connected can still get the cable signal because there's so much leakage in the coaxial. And that's why the cable companies always want to use they want you to use their equipment, because they're using higher quality equipment that will have smaller leaks. They will actually have trucks drive around neighborhoods that can determine the leaks. And then they'll contact the customer and say, you got a leak in your cable, we got to come in and fix it for you. Even though you may want it that way, they want to fix it. Now these coaxial cables are duplex. Now what that means is you can carry the signal in both directions. Now that's important because, what happens is the industry has not generally exploited this feature. They have, but a lot of people think they could do a lot more. In other words, what I mean is this. You have a subscription, okay? And so you pay for the subscription. And then you can do pay-per-view. And that's when you send a message up to the provider saying, I want to watch this boxing match. Now, you see, so you're going both directions. You're going to have content coming down. You're going to have your request going up. And because of that, you can see the upstream is going to be much smaller, 5 to 40 megahertz. The downstream you want to be larger. And so you have more bandwidth going downstream because that's what the content is. But you have the upstream so you can order things online. Say, I want this, I want that, whatever. And downstream so they can actually get the content. Okay, so that's why so all these coaxial cables must be duplex. They must be able to go both directions. Okay, so this is another part of the structure. A little bit different than the other one. So we got some hubs, 3 hubs there, and each one of those hubs will have an entire network off of it. And there you see again where we have the fiber optic cable now on there. Okay, and it goes to an optical node, which then is going to deliver this stuff through the trunk cable again. So you see what happens now is the trunk cable doesn't have to come from the head end. It can come from the optical node. But the same thing, it still goes to your neighborhood the same way. You're still going to have drops. You're still going to have taps. This is a much more contemporary structure. The other one I showed you was a traditional. This one is how it works when you have fiber optic cable. Okay. Okay. I think I'll stop at this point and I'll pick up next time. We'll start here because I want you to not have to sit here and listen to me for too long at one time. So let's stop here and I'll come back with a third lecture in just a minute when we talk about the modern era of television. Okay? See you in a few minutes.